Pasuk in the Megillah in Esther, Perek Tes, Pasuk Chavches, 9:28 in Megillah Esther tells us V'hayamim ha'ela nizkarim v'na'asim. People misunderstand. They think that the word nizkarim means to remember. It does not in that pasuk. In modern Hebrew and in biblical Hebrew, it means to mention. V'hayamim ha'ela nizkarim v'na'asim. It teaches us that there is a fundamental difference between Kriyas Megillah b'layla and Kriyas Megillah b'yom. There's a nighttime Megillah learning, the nighttime Megillah reading, which is on a level of D'Rabbanan. And the daytime, the morning Kriyas Megillah, which is on a higher level. This is a common misconception, not one of the 18 that we're going to have in halachic misconceptions, the 41st topic. But so I'll just say it now, that there is a difference. At nighttime, it's the Rabbanan. People think that because everybody comes to the nighttime reading, men, women, and children, that the nighttime reading is on a higher level. It is not. During the morning is on a higher level, and that is why we usually do not allow general poskim. A large group of poskim do not allow a newly minted bar mitzvah boy to lane the Megillah in the morning. They'll only allow a newly minted bar mitzvah boy to lane the Megillah at night. That is what we learn from V'hayamim ha'ela nizkarim v'na'asim. The day is the time between the two times, night and day. The day is the one that's mentioned in Esther Tes Chavches, and that is why the daytime is on a higher level. The Gemara in Megillah Daf Daled Amud Aleph quotes Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that tells us this is what we see. Says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Chayev Adam likros Megillah b'layla v'lishnosa bayom. You have to repeat it. Lishnosa from the term of lishanos, to do something different, which also proves lishanot. Lishanos means that the nighttime reading is on one level, the rabbinic level, midrabanan, and our daytime is on a higher level. We already gave one nafkamina of our mitzvah boy. We'll give a second nafkamina, and that is the idea of saying Shechianu again. Normally, we've spoken a lot about Shechianu in 40 topics. We've spoken about it many times, and we've mentioned that Shechianu is a machlokes, the nature of Shechianu. Why we say Shechianu on Tkiyah Shofar, on Neiros Chanukah, on Kriyas Megillah, on all those brachos, on Netzilas Lulav, is for two reasons. Machlokes, the Rambam and the Baal HaMor, and we'll say it again. The Rambam says that it's a mitzvah haba mizman lizman, that when you do a mitzvah haba mizman lizman, implies that you're doing it once a year, every year. Okay, you're doing it here, you're doing it twice a year. The Baal HaMor is the one who says, this is in Psachim, in the Dapi Arif, in Arvei Psachim, all the way at the end of the Masechta. Psachim has 121 blot. This is the last daf in the Dape Harif, in the back of the Gemara in Psachim, the Baal HaMor on Shechianu, on the Gemara in Psachim Kuf Chaf Aleph, that says that is why we don't say Shechianu on Sfiras HaOmer. The obvious question is, why wouldn't we say Shechianu on Sfiras HaOmer? And says the Baal HaMor, you say Shechianu on a mitzvah de Isba Simcha. Says the Baal HaMor, L'da'ava nafshenu, to the worry and the sadness of our hearts. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash now. B'mheri Bana Mikdash, so we will say Shechianu on Sfiras HaOmer. We'll bring the Karban HaOmer again. But that is why we say Shechianu. What we learn from this is that you say Shechianu when it's Lishnosa Bayom. You have a different chiyuv. You have a higher level, an elevated chiyuv, Izzy, of laning the Megillah again in the morning. So it's a fundamentally different chiyuv, and that is why we say Shechianu at night and in the morning. At night is midrabanan, in the morning is midivrei Kabbalah. We gave those nafkaminas of a newly minted bar mitzvah boy. Newly minted bar mitzvah boy, again, should only read balayla. He should not lane during the morning. What happens if you miss a word in the audience? Not that the Baal Koreh definitely missed the word, but you thought that the Baal Koreh missed the word, and you're the one in the audience. You are listening to the Megillah. What happens if you think that you missed a word, that the Baal Kriya, you think as the audience member, the Baal Kriya missed a word when he laned the Megillah? So what do? So this opens up a larger question of what you do when you have a suffix. The poskim paskin Safek Kriyas Megillah l'chumra. Why is Safek Kriyas Megillah l'chumra if we know that it's not a deoraisa? We know Safek deoraisa l'chumra, Safek d'Rabbanan l'kula. So maybe this is d'Rabbanan, especially if it was at the nighttime laning. So it's d'Rabbanan as opposed to the day, which is divrei Kabbalah. Divrei Kabbalah means not divrei Kabbalah as in esoteric things, but divrei Kabbalah not as in Kabbalistic things. Divrei Kabbalah means that it's words that are learned, dinim that are learned from Nevi'im and Ksuvim. So dinim that are learned from Nevi'im and Ksuvim. So what happens? So we say Safek Kriyas Megillah l'chumra. Why Safek Kriyas Megillah l'chumra? So the Ran explains in Megillah, on the Gemara in Megillah Daf Ham on the Gemara in Megillah Daf Ham and Beis, The Gemara says that Hutzal was one of the cities. Hutzal and Tiberia were one of the cities. Hevav Tzadi Lamed was one of the cities where Yama Chomasa, the wall was the ocean in effect, meaning it was surrounded by water, it was surrounded by a wall on three sides. The fourth side was open, but it was surrounded by an ocean. And the question is Yama Chomasa, does water constitute a wall or does water not constitute a wall? But the Gemara leaves it as a suffix. They were bliped by a suffix. They remained as a suffix. And yet, suffix kriyas of gilul chumra. Why? Because, says the Ran, if you took this suffix one day at a time and you said, does Hutzal have to observe Purim on Yudalid? You would say no, because it's a drabanan Purim. Purim's not mentioned in the Torah, obviously. And then you looked at Tesvav, and you said, should they observe Purim on Tesvav and Hutzal? And you'd leave it as a suffix. If you looked at each suffix individually, you would say suffix drabanan l'kula, you'd end up with no Purim. Says the Ran, the corollary example is the Gemara in Psachim, Daf Kuf Ches Amud Aleph. The Gemara in Psachim 108a has the large sugya of Haseba, leaning by the Daled Kosos, reclining by the 4 cups of wine. Also coming attractions. Purim Pesach, coming attractions. Says the Gemara in Psachim Daf Kuf Ches, it has the same shaila. If you look at each one of the Daled Kosos, you would say Haseba's not Minat Torah. Haseba's not biblically mandated. It's rabbinically mandated. Haseba's a din midrabanan, and you would say suffix drabanan l'kula by each of the daled kosos, you'd end up with no haseba. That is what we call, and I want to introduce you to the concept, a suffix b'makom tarti desatri, like from the word stira, so samech taf yud reish hey, a suffix b'makom tarti desatri. When you have a self-contradictory psak, you have to go l'chumra. Otherwise, you'd end up with nothing. You'd end up with no Purim in Megillah Hayamid Beis by Hutzal and Tiberia, and you'd end up with no Haseba, no reclining by the Daled Kosos in Psachim Kuf Ches. So you have to go l'chumra. So you're not sure. So suffix kriyas gilul l'chumra. We have many other examples of this, and Makoros. People want to give a Purim Chabura on this. This is a great topic to give a Purim Chabura on. The Mishnah in Psachim as well as the Mishnah in Taros. The Mishnah in Taros, Maseches Taros, which is in Seder Taros, Perek Hey, Mishnah Hey, has that Shnei Shvilin. It's the case of Shnei Shvilin, if there are 2 paths to go, Echad Tahor, Echad Tameh v'Echad Tahor, 2 paths to go, and a Kohen is being Osek Betruma, says the Mishnah. The Mishnah in Taros, Hey. So we're not sure. So the Mishnah says that we have to be machmir. We need to be machmir because it's a case of a suffix makom tarti desasrei. It's machlokas hatanaim, and the Mishnah quote at the end of the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says that we have to be machmir and say sveiko tameh, that whatever the Kohen's being osekin and the shnei shvilin, he can't go on either of the Shnei Shvilin. Why? That's a suffix, makom tarti desatre. Each path, each one of the Shvilin, each Shvil is going to be looked at individually. So again, and you're going to end up with, you're going to say that this is tahor and that's tahor. So you have to look at it as a self-contradictory suffix, a self-contradictory psak. You can't say that everything's okay for the Kohen to go on. You can't look at each path. They have this by the GWB. I forget, and I'm always bad at 50-50. But the George Washington Bridge in New York, one of the levels, there's an upper level and a lower level. One of the levels, halach l'maisa, one of the levels is a problem for Kohanim to drive on. So I'm not sure which one. But again, we say that the Kohanim shouldn't go on the upper or lower level. Shnei Shvilin. You have to be very careful. If you looked at each suffix individually, you would be makil. You can't be makil. You have to be machmir. So that is why, if you have a recording, bottom line, halacha l'maisa, there are more makoros for this also. If you have a suffix, whether you miss the word when hearing the Megillah, if there is a recording, you have a chiyuv to listen to the recording. You have a chiyuv to go back to the beginning. I want to just say also, and this is how I should have started, the subtopic of what happens if you think you missed the word when hearing the Megillah. It says nowhere in halacha, in Shas, nowhere in Shas and Poskim, that if you miss a word when hearing the Megillah, you're not Yotzei. What it does say, people also, there's a common misconception. People think that if you miss a word, no, it's not if you miss a word that you're not Yotzei. the halacha says, if you don't understand a word, then you're not yotzei. But there are words that everybody doesn't understand. The Art Scroll translates certain words. Achash tiranim b'nei haramachim. Those were the horsemen, couriers. The couriers on horsemen that would bring the telegrams in the story of the Megillah. Achash tiranim b'nei haramachim. Art Scroll, Koran, or whatever other translations, Bekoshi, in a difficult way, have English words. The King James Bible even have English words to translate. But we don't know what those words really mean. We translate them as horsemen, mares, hair, whatever it is. We don't really know what that means. So it can't be that if you miss a word, then you're not Yotzi. If you don't understand a word, which is why people should, to the best of their ability, either lock in, I shouldn't say either, they should definitely lock in, and if you're worried you're going to miss a word, have a kosher Megillah next to you. Either you have an actual Megillah, a klaf, or sit next to someone who has a klaf so that you can catch up with a kosher Megillah. It's not the same if you have an illustrated, they're beautiful. We all grew up with them. The illustrated Art Scroll Megillahs. Hardcover, soft cover with the picture of Mordechai on the horse, and this and that, whatever. That's great. You all know what I'm talking about. But if you miss a word, so you can't catch up with that. You have to catch up with the kosher Megillah. So again, if you have it on recording, you have a chiyuv to go back and listen. If you don't, so then you don't. So then we say that it's a drabanan and safek drabanan l'kula, but be'ikaron safek kriyas Megillah l'chumra, because it's a safek makom tarti b'sasrei. I want to get to Mishloach Manos, the Shulchan, the Gemara first. The Gemara in Megillah, Daf Zayin and Aleph at the bottom, spilling over to Zayin and Days, tells us, Megillah 7a and 7b, tells us that one must send 2 manos, 2 portions, to one person. It's shtei manos li'ish echad. Mishloach manos ish l're'eyu. As opposed to, by the way, matanos la'evyonim, where both words are in plural. It's 2 gifts to the poor. 2 portions of charity to 2 different aniyim. But Mishloach Manos is 2 manos to one person. People think you could just send candy, you could just send chocolate, you could just send sweets. You could send snacks. You could do that after you send real food. The Gemara says that they sent deli, what our English friends in London and Manchester call cold meat, what we call cold cuts or deli. The Americans call cold cuts or deli. You have to send real food. You can't just send candy, fruit by the foot. You can't send Reese's. I love Reese's. You can't send Reese's, and everybody does. You can send that after. That is why when they have the communal shul mishloach manos, yeah, cheaper, but they have. In Manchester they have this, and in Los Angeles they have this, and in Hamatzor and Shtiblach they have this. Now we've covered everybody. So, and in North Woodmere they have this, and everybody, and in Toronto they have this, and in Bergen County, in New Jersey, and Yerushalayim, Yarkodesh they have this. It's cheaper. Seattle and New Rochelle, they have it too. Seattle and New Rochelle. And the Russacks have it too. But I told you that I went to, he's 2 years behind me, so he's not so many years behind me. But is that your uncle, Josh? Yeah. Right. So the Russacks were 2 years behind me in Rashid. But anyway, thank you. So it's cheaper to do it that way, it's more convenient, but do that after you spend real money. That is why, for years, and maybe I should do it this year, I haven't done it the last couple of years, I send out about 15, 20 questions of Megillah trivia, Megillah Esther trivia. I don't think Gemara Megillah trivia also, I think, mixed in, and the person who gets the most answers correct quickly gets a Rav Dovi Mishloach Manos, which is a mechubedik. It's either New Delhi or Mini Delhi, or it's Chatzer, or I give you money to go get your Chatzer. I usually give the prepared food, but you give real food, a drink of your choice. Now my favorites are a cold raspberry Snapple, or a cold Arizona ginseng iced tea, a green tea, or if the person can't get cold, so we give them warm. But you have to give real food. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Tafrei Tzadihei. Yeah, quickly.
I think you already answered my question, but can you give them a voucher for a restaurant? Or
technically you can, but you should give them. The Gemara says that you should give prepared foods.
Right.
You really have to give prepared foods. I guess b'dochak b'di'evet, but we always try to be a l'chachila Jew. So the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tafrei Tzadihei 695, if Dalid 695 4, the Shulchan Aruch in Arach Chaim in Hilchos Megillah says that you have to send 2 manos to one person. You are allowed to give 2 foods with the same bracha, and there doesn't need to be a theme to the mishloach manos. I was in Yonkers, which is near Riverdale, giving mishloach manos to someone, and they gave me back a Dunkin' Donuts and a Bud Light. So unless there's an egg and cheese in there, I also like egg and cheeses, but unless there's an egg and cheese in there, an egg and cheese is the only thing. You don't have to give hamotzi, but you have to give real food. You can give the fruit by the foot after. You can give the Reese's after, but not after you give fleshings. But you can give fine, whatever. What's the nature of mishloach manos? What's the lumdus behind mishloach manos? What are mishloach manos trying to accomplish? So the Rambam in Hilchos Megillah, Beis Tesvav, groups mishloach manos and Sudas Purim together, but the Rambam says it's to provide someone with a Sudas Purim. Mishloach manos, Hilchos Megillah 2:15, chapter 2, law 15. Beis Tesvav, the Rambam says that you have to give someone something that's good enough for Sudas Purim. Zetmin Funda, you see from this that you have to give someone real food. And the Manos Halevi, the Trumas Hadeshin agrees with the Rambam. The Trumas Hadeshin, it was at the border of Rishonim and Achronim. I've said this before. Some people consider the Trumas Hadeshin the last Rishon. Some consider him roughly the first Achron. But the Trumas Hadeshin agrees with the Rambam. The Rambam and the Trumas Hadeshin argue with the Manos Halevi, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, who had a parish on Megillas Esther. The Manos Halevi says it's laharbos reyos b'Yisrael, to increase friendship. You're giving mishloach manos to increase friendship. According to the Manos Halevi, then you should give it to somebody who you know, but you need to get better friends with. Or you want to get better friends with. You want to become better friends with. Don't give it to Farkas. Don't give it to your roommate and chavrusa and best friends, whatever. Don't give it to the TABC Eli Frogel. Right? So, okay, good. So, exactly a year ago. So good. I want him to listen to this recording. You can tell him anyway. Fine. So don't give it to the TABC Eli Frogel. Laharbos Reyes Yisrael, to increase friendship that you already have, but you're not best friends with the person. A couple of nafkaminas between these 2 ways to look the chakira within Mishloach Manos. The Rambam and Trumas Hadeshin on one side, and the Manos Halevi, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, who wrote the Hilchot Dovi, by the way. The Manos Halevi on the other side. First nafkamina is if you give your friend and your friend is mochel and he doesn't accept. That's one. The Ramah says to that in Taf Reis Tzadi Dalid, Seif Hey, 694, Seif 5, that you're still Yotzei. You're still Yotzei, the fact that you gave your friend, so it's your friend's problem. Your friend's mochel and he doesn't accept. The second nafkamina is if it doesn't meet the recipient's kashrus standards. It doesn't meet the recipient's allergy standards also. You didn't realize he was allergic to peanuts and you gave him a Reese's as a dessert to a egg and cheese or an omelet bagel. Good. Fine. He still sees that you tried hard for Mishloach Manos.
Is that the Ramah as well?
What?
Is that also the Ramah, the second nafkamina?
The Ramah doesn't comment on the second. I don't have what the Ramah says on the second nafkamina, just on the first nafkamina.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you have to give something that's ready to be served at a meal. Doesn't have to be hamotzi. Does not have to be hamotzi, but ready to be served at a meal. There's a machlokas achronim whether the mishloach manos needs to be given on yidei shaliach, because it's mishloach manos. So, because it's called mishloach manos, l'maisa either way is okay. Women are obligated in mishloach manos. Men should not be giving to women. A real halachic statement. Men should not be giving to women. Women should not be giving directly to men. You can give, families can give to each other. Just because the wife answers the door doesn't mean the husband needs to run away. Doesn't mean to say that the other man needs to run away. But men should be giving to men. Women should be giving to women. Mishnah Brura is the one who says that women are chayav. The Mishnah Brura says they're chayavos. They shouldn't give to men. An avel may give, but he can't receive. He can't receive the reyos. He can't receive the joy on Purim. But he can give to other people. The Mishnah Brura says that's based on the Isser of She'ela Shalom. The Shulchan Aruch, we had this a couple of weeks ago. Aninos and Avelos, and I think we did in room 2. So we spoke about how there's an Isser She'ela Shalom. There's the Shulchan Aruch and Yoredeya Chelik Gimel. Yoredeya Chelik Gimel and Hilchos Avelos. Fine. For Suda, there's the Sudas Purim. V'hayamim ha'ela nizkarim v'na'asim nizkarim, to mention, refers to Kriyas Megillah. Na'asim refers to the Shar Mitzvos Hayom Purim, to the other Mitzvos Hayom. Mishloach Manos, Sudas Purim, and Matanos Le'evyonim. But specifically, the Suda is the Na'asim. The Rambam in Hilchos Megillah groups Mishloach Manos and Suda together and asks, the Rambam asks in Hilchos Megillah Beis Tesvav, Keitzad Chovas Sudazu. What's the obligation? Ochel basar v'shosei yayin. You eat meat, you drink wine. Basar actually doesn't appear in Chazal. When the Gemara in Pesachim, Daf Kuf Tes, the Gemara in Pesachim 109a says that there's Ein Simcha. It says Ein Simcha Ela B'Yayin. The Rambam adds basar. People always think the two go together. Technically, they do go together, but according to the Gemara, Talmudically, they actually don't. So, basar doesn't appear in Chazal. Ein Simcha Ela B'Yayin. And again, I said before, he mentions the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos in that same halacha. It appears that you should give Mishloach Manos, according to the Rambam, you should give Mishloach Manos together with the Suda. So you're going to someone for Suda, Lahar Bos Reyes, to increase friendship. So you don't have to give Mishloach Manos to that same family, but maybe give it at the same time, around the same time. There's a connection between the two. There's a machlokas achronim when you should give Mishloach Manos. We were talking about the Suda, but when should you give Mishloach Manos? Rav Soloveitchik, the Rav, said you give it after the Sudas Purim. It's kind of logistically hard to do that. Both logistically hard and mentally, cerebrally hard, emotionally hard. Soloveitchik says after the Suda. Rav Moshe Sternbach, Sefer Moadim Uzmanim, the black Sefer that we have, black and gold, that we have in the HL, in the Hebrew Library. An unbelievable Sefer on sugyas related to Chagim and Yom Tovim. A massive, massive Talmud Chacham and a great Sefer and a great work. Rav Moshe Sternbach, B-U-C-H. Rav Moshe Sternbach says you give it before the Suda. We generally possibly like Rav Moshe Sternbach. There's no zman of this mitzvah technically. It doesn't need to be a 3 p.m., 4 p.m., just by Yom. Many do it in the afternoon for practical reasons. The Ramah says there's no halacha that it has to be in the afternoon. It's just practical reasons. The Ramah adds another reason why people do it in the afternoon, Adin. The Ramah says that there's an Indian, there's an idea that it goes into Shushan Purim a little bit. Rofa Olam, observing Purim on Yudalid. So I love how I used to call it Shushan Purim when I was younger. Now I just call it Purim. So it's a real schus to be a resident of Yerushalayim Yar Kodesh, that you and your family are also. It's beautiful. So there's an idea it should go into Shushan Purim a little bit. Next, the Gemara in Megillah Daf Zayin and Beis says Chayev Mechayev Inish L'Sumei B'Puraya Ad Lo Yada Ben Ar Haman L'Barach Mordechai. Now the Gemara doesn't use the term Mechayev too many times, and definitely not on something that is somewhat controversial. So what does it really mean? So I want to take it a step deeper. Who said that statement, Mechayev Inish? The Gemara in Megillah 7b, Megillah Zayin and Beis. You will learn something that you've never learned before. The Gemara quotes Rava as saying, Amar Rava, Mechayev Inish L'Sumei B'Puraya Ad Lo Yada Ben Ar Haman L'Barach Mordechai. And then it tells the story right after the Gemara lists Rava. The way the Gemara is formatted is it then tells the Agarata, the story of Rabba Shachtei L'Rav Zera. And Achyeh, he brought him back to life. Rabba got drunk, and he shechted Rav Zera. Whether you take that literally,
Rabba or Rava?
Rabba shechted Rav Zera. The statement was made by Rava. Amar Rava, Mechayev Inish L'Sumei B'Puraya Ad Lo Yada Ben Ar Haman L'Barach Mordechai. By the way, adding to your notes, Rashi says that L'Bisume, Rashi says, L'Hishtaker B'Yayin. Only wine. I love Heineken too, but Heineken does not fulfill the mitzvah of Shichrus on Purim. And then it has the story of Rabba Shachtei L'Rav Zera. Rabba Shachtei L'Rav Zera, and then he brought him back to life. And Rabba said to Rav Zera, why don't we do the Sudas Purim together next year? And Rav Zera said back to him, Lo b'chol shaita v'shaita s'rachish nisa. Lo b'chol yom v'yom s'rachish nisa. Miracles don't happen all the time. What are you, crazy? You think you're going to be able to revive me next year also when you shecht me? When you're under the influence? If you look at this Gemara, the way that it's formatted, Shaklamataria-wise, Rava makes his statement, Mechayev Inish, And the Gemara then puts the brakes on the statements and says, the story comes to teach you that drinking is irresponsible and inappropriate. People vomit, they barf, and they get all disgusting, and they get destructive and dangerous. A couple of people are giving the sugya of Adam Hamazik B'Purim. I provided them the koros for it, so I know they're definitely giving. They better be giving. Adam Hamazik B'Purim, it's a great sugya. But the story comes to tell you that, and there have been car accidents. There are people who have had to have their stomachs pumped. Rahman, it's terrible. But if you look at the Gemara historically, with the 5,000 years of Torah history, and we're doing Abaye and Rava next week, so get excited. But the Gemara in Bav Metzia in the 7th Perek, arguably the best Agarita Perek in all of Shas, and it has a lot of strong competition. But the Gemara in Bav Metzia in the 7th Perek says that Rabbah lived B'Seva Tova. He lived to a normal ripe old age, relatively ripe old age, and a respectable age. And there's a machlokas about that, but fine. And Rava was at Rabbah's funeral. So the story with Rabbah and Rav Zera happened first, and then Rava made his statement after. So the statement comes to reject the story. The din comes, the halacha comes to reject the story. The story happened, and even so, Rava said, Aval pichein mechai vinish l'suim puraya. So those are two ways to understand. The Pri Chadash says that the statement of Rava, the Pri Chadash in the back of the Shulchan Aruch says, mechai vinish l'suim puraya. But there are others who say, right, the Pri Chadash says chayiv. Rabbeinu Ephraim says that no, the story comes to reject the din. You have to be very careful. The story comes to reject the din. That you have to be careful. You can't get irresponsibly drunk. Drink responsibly. The Baal Hamor, on that Gemara in Megillah, in the back of the Gemara in Megillah, but on that Gemara in Megillah, the Dapi Arif, the Baal Hamor also agrees with Rabbeinu Ephraim. The Baal Hamor says it's usher to get drunk on Purim. Usher to get drunk on Purim. The Levush adds, the halacha commentary of Levush, we've quoted a couple times in 40 topics, says that it can only be yayin. Echoes what Rashi says. That's what Levush. That's what they drank in the Purim story, Mishneh yayin. And just like Sudas Purim, the Gemara in Megillah, Zayin Amud Beis, before the din of Ad Lo Yada, before the din of Shvias Yayin B'Purim and Shichrus Yayin B'Purim, the Gemara says, Sudas Purim, She'asa Balayla Lo Yatza. You can't fulfill a Sudas Purim at night. We know the Purim Suda is only during the day, the next day, Purim day. It can go into the next night of what for most of the world, Rov HaOlam is Shushan Purim, but the Rambam says that you can't ad lo yada also does not apply at night. They serve some drinks here. You can drink a little bit, a tipa min ayam, but you can't get drunk Purim at night. If you can get drunk, you can only get drunk Purim during the day. How do we paskin? So the Ramah says the Ovid Kimar Ovid, the Ovid Kimar Ovid. But before he says that, he says that you drink and then you go to sleep. We were talking about this briefly. Because you asked me what I personally do. What I personally do is I straddle both opinions. I paskin like the Pri Chadash, and I paskin like the Gemara. I paskin like Rava, and I paskin like Rabba and Rav Zera. And I paskin like the story where I get tipsy. But as soon as I get tipsy, or I get even a little bit more, if I even get a little more than tipsy, I go lie down. That's what the Ramah says. The Ramah says that you go lie down after. You're not allowed to go around. You're not allowed to frolic around town and everything like that. You have to be responsible. And nichas yayin yatzasod. Nichnas yayin yatzasod. You better believe that you better be the full Ben Torah. That whatever is going to come out of you if you drink better be right. I still remember that Shana Bet guy, initials are actually YK. But I still remember standing by the Kinnis steps in Tafshin Ayin Aleph 15 years ago. He was a Shana Bet guy, ranking, yelling, insulting. Someone asked me what the word ranking meant yesterday. Ranking and insulting his Shana Aleph guy for being a terrible Shana Aleph Chabrusa. Already a Purim 3/4 into the year. Be very careful. Be very careful. Now this guy's a Ben Torah, okay, he recovered from Purim, whatever. But be very careful. So you see from me that I say responsibly, if you want to drink, just make sure that you're in a area where you can be responsible, that you're near your bed, that you don't leave the building, that It definitely says mechayev. There's definitely a chiyuv to get drunk on Purim. So that you can't argue with. You can't argue with that line in the Gemara. The question is the story and the din and all of that. Be very, very careful. Matanos le'avyonim is geared towards Sudas Purim. Mishnah is also Mishloach Manos is also geared towards Sudas Purim, but Matanos le'avyonim is geared towards Sudas Purim. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Reis Tzadik Dalid 694 Seif Aleph 694.1 OC 694.1 says that the way to calculate Matanos Le'avyonim is you make a monetary calculation, how much the Suda is, you go off the Suda, how much people usually spend on a day for a Suda, and whatever he does with that money, whatever the Ani does with that money is none of your business. That's why there's a special din of Kol HaPoshet Yad Nosnin Lo. People take advantage of that because they see somebody drunk in the old city, a yeshiva guy who walked out of the building even though he shouldn't have. You're allowed to get drunk. As I said before, you're allowed to get drunk. You're definitely allowed to get drunk, but you shouldn't be leaving the Hakotel building drunk. And I'm saying that for your own protection and for anybody who's listening to this, anybody who's watching this. And I'm not just being PC because I'm on video and I'm on recording. I really believe that. I said myself that I drink on Purim, but you have to be responsible. And there are people standing out there who are wealthy people, and they're saying, yeah, but they didn't say all of a sudden they know the Shulchan Aruch, and they know what the Shulchan Aruch says. But the Shulchan Aruch says, Kol HaPoshet Yad Nosnin Lo. No, that's not the din. The din is not to be rolling around in a Rolls Royce and rolling around in a Maserati and saying, Kol HaPoshet Yad Nosnin Lo, and wearing Gucci and wearing Prada and saying, Kol HaPoshet Yad Nosnin Lo. No, that's not the din. But you make the monetary calculation of how much a person spends in a day, just getting back to this, person spends in a day, how much he spends on food, and that's what you really need to give. You don't need to spend more than that, but that's what you give. We mentioned last week, by the way, at the outset of Purim, right before Purim, that the machzah shekel that we give is not a machzah shekel, because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, but B'nheira Yibana HaMikdash we will. It's a zecher l'machzah shekel. Those plates or those pushkas, those stucco boxes, those kupot that they have on the shul bima in Seattle and in Los Angeles and in Manchester, Woodmere, Toronto, North Woodmere, Toronto, Fair Lawn, New Jersey, Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, you're giving zecher l'machzah shekel. It would be a wise thing to do two things. One is give a little bit more for tzedakah. We're stingy. We give to the Yachad Marathon and all that. But let's give a little bit more. Let's give a little bit more to our beloved Talmidim. Let's give a little bit more to the Aniyim. If we're giving to our beloved Talmidim who, Baruch Hashem, are not Aniyim, we're all not Aniyim, so give to Aniyim a little bit more. And the other thing I'll say, which has real sources, but it's not a halachic sugya, is, or if it is, it's a very small one, is the idea of, it's a great Purim Chabura topic on Monday night, March 2nd. That would actually be Motzei Tanis Esther. When you get to Chaburas, the following thing is a great topic, but there's a special inyan to Daven Vasikin on Purim. Purim is a day that's mesugal for tefillah. I'm not into skulos at all. I laugh at skulos, classic litvak, but Purim is a day of tefillah. Where do we get that from? We get that from Esther Hamalka in Perek Hey and Perek Zayin of Megillas Esther, having the scepter, Achashverosh, extending the scepter to her and giving her Archatzia Malchus, giving her, and the Medrash in Esther Rabbah says that she, amazing looking nose, the Medrash in Esther Rabbah, it just looks like artwork. The Medrash in Esther, he doesn't want the cameras on him, please. The Medrash in Esther Rabbah, I'm sure you all do, but you're behind the screen. Beautiful. No, it's Ellie, my Ellie, beautiful. Esther Hamalka uttered she said, Kapitel Tehillim, Perek Chaf Beis. Perek Chaf Beis is Keli Lama Azaftani, Rachok Mishuasi, Divrei Shagasi. I'm far from the Yeshua. These are my words of Shaga, of despair and yelling out, Ein Shum Yish Ba'olam Klal. But, so that's what it is, but it's a day, Kol HaPoshet Yad Nosnin Lo, if that's what Aniyim say, so I say that with Tefillah, I connected Tefillah to the Aniyim and the Mitzvah Matanos Le'avyonim. We believe that Kol HaPoshet Yad Nosnin Lo, if we extend our hand, if we beseech the Ribono Shel Olam, hopefully Nosnin Lo. Doesn't mean to save all our requests for Purim morning Shacharis. We should be davening every day in every Tefillah, but fine. There are a couple of other things. The origin of wearing costumes. So, the pasuk in Parshas Vayelech says that the hint to Esther in the Torah is the Anochi Haster Astir Panai Bayomahu. I will surely hide my face on that day. That is an answer. The pasuk in Vayelech is an answer to the Gemara in Chulin, Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. The Gemara in Chulin 139b asks, Esther min haTorah minayin, pasuk in Vayelech. Haman min haTorah minayin, Parshas Bereishis. Hamin ha'etz, Asher tzvisicha le'echol imenu achalta. So Esther is hidden, and the name Esther remains hidden. This is the source for hiding one's true self on Purim. It is a real halachic inyan to get into costumes on Purim. But I told somebody last week, who's not here with us this week, the birthday boy from yesterday, that I told him to remind me. I'm sure he's doing some important birthday stuff. I told him to remind me because he's not here, so I totally forgot. I forgot to do it at the beginning of Shir, so I'll do this now. The Maharil, as quoted in Shulchan Aruch, says one of the most important things. On Purim, at Tefillah, Purim night for Kriyas Megillah, and Purim morning during davening and Kriyas Megillah. Purim night during Mariv and Kriyas Megillah, you must be in Big Day Shabbos. You could change into your costume. I also wear a costume. Change into your costume after Kriyas Megillah. You're not 5 years old anymore. You're not in 11th grade anymore. You're not in year 13 anymore. You're not in grade 10 anymore. Now we've covered everyone. You're not. We're not in elementary and primary school anymore. We're not in high school anymore. Wear Big Day Shabbos. Every year there is a full 40 comprehensive halachic topics picture that is taken. I'm leaning in Pinsker, so I'm never here for Kriyas Megillah. You take a picture, it's always the one that's taken right outside the base medrash, of all the guys standing in one row in their white shirts, the 40 topics guys, and they we'll work on the Rashi Tevos of, shop together, whatever it is. We'll work on that for the Pics and Vids group, but always wearing Big Day Shabbos. You want to add a tie, wear a tie, but everyone should be wearing a white shirt. At best, you want to wear a suit, that's beautiful, a white shirt and dark pants. And if you can, so shoes also. And then you could change right after. It's fine. Change right after Kriyas Megillah. The Chol Zaro, good, go downstairs after Asher Heni, after Haravis Rivenu, after Asher Heni, and after Shoshanas Yaakov, and you go downstairs and change. But during Mariv and Kriyas Megillah, you guys are Talmidei Chachamim. So I just say, the Maharil says, everybody in Big Day Shabbos for Kriyas Megillah. But costumes are a real inyan. And we'll end also with a lot of things are the issues with Purim spiels. I'll tell you why I'm not giving that, not just because I don't want to run a show like I don't care. Purim spiels are mutter, you just have to be careful, but there are makoros to the Purim spiel. I'm saving this for people who want to give a Purim chabura on either Purim spiels or noise making with Haman or shatnez in Purim costumes. A lot of different inyanim. If you want makoros on any of those, we could do your Purim chabura in a matter of minutes. I'm happy to send you makoros on all of that. I could work with each of you on a different topic. That's fine. But I just want to end off saying that noise making at the mention of Haman's name is brought down in halacha. The Ramah in Siman Taf Reish Tzadi 690, if Tezayin 690:16 says the purpose of noise making at the mention of Haman's name is to erase his name based on the commandment to erase the name of Amalek. Zechiras Mechias Amalek. We're going to have Parsha Zachor next Shabbos. Haman was a descendant of Amalek. It's a fulfillment of Mechias Amalek. It's a minhag. It's a strong minhag reserved for children. I've said before, I've quoted Rabbeinu Tam throughout this year. Rabbeinu Tam says that if you switch around the letters of minhag, you get Osios Gehenim. If you think that minhagim are just lightweight, and you don't keep minhag Yisrael, minhag Ka'alacha, you don't keep minhagim, you know straight where you're going. So good. Okay. So minhag is Osios Gehenim. You should make sure that when you're noise making for Haman, you shouldn't be as my grand Rebbe, your great grand Rebbe, Moreno Harav Hershel Shechter Shlita says, it's just obnoxious when people make noise for Haman after they've told people to be quiet. When I was growing up in shul, when I was a very young kid, I'd say about 4 or 5, they had an actual stop sign. Somebody ripped off a stop sign from one of the streets in Fairlawn. and they brought it into shul on Purim, and they used it for many years. Nobody caught them, and they hung up the stop sign after each Haman. They gave 4 or 5 seconds, 4 or 5 seconds. Oh my gosh, 4 or 5. Okay, it's done. It's dead. It's done. Okay, Baruch Danena's good. Okay, we love you. Okay, amazing. And they would put up the sign. It's just obnoxious, and it poses a problem of hefsek. When there was a guy who had a saxophone in the back of shul, a guy who had a trumpet, they were making a whole mach lebedik with a whole orchestra. That's inappropriate. So, and also a cap gun in people's ear, and firecrackers in shul. Firecrackers don't belong in shul. Like our niggin tonight, Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Summit. You should, we're doing that because the Parshas Truma. I'll send out the message with the niggin a little bit later. But I don't know if we should do the Saint Sachar Tov. We haven't had the Saint Sachar Tov people in a few weeks.
I'll be there tonight, don't worry.
I don't know, throwing shade. I don't know. Good. But fine. And I'm going to save the other ones, because I'd like to think I'm a little bit of a tzaddik. I'm trying to become a full tzaddik, but a little bit of a tzaddik. I'll save the rest of them for individual, if you guys want to give Purim Chaburas, and either you're somewhat in love with your topic, but you think my topic might be better, or you think my topic might be more substantive and also efficient. We'll do it 15, 20 minutes will be your Chabura. I'll give you the Makoros in 3 minutes, and you guys can have a Chabura and a Sugya to go. On that note, have a wonderful, frail, safe, and responsible Purim.